right, good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Faye. We have conversations to help us answer questions and understand what's going on. The farmer protests still top of mind now internationally as well as in India. But we're not looking at the Twitter wars at this point about the tweeting celebrities. What we're looking at is the various arguments that are being made about the farmers' protest. We're going to try and address those arguments and try and understand what is really going on. To help me answer those questions, I have Mr. Devendra Sharma, who joins us right now, a very respected food and trade policy analyst. It's also our attempt on this YouTube channel to bring in as many voices as we can. So as our audience members, especially those on our Discord server, feel free to give us suggestions of people you'd like us to bring in so that we can get as many diverse voices as we can get. Now, to introduce the guest to you this evening, Devendra Sharma used to be a journalist, but he is now a researcher, food and trade policy analyst, and very respected one. He's been writing on agriculture for a very long time. He has a master's in plant breeding and genetics, but he's one of those voices that we've referred to in India for decades when it comes to issues in agriculture and issues in farming. So we're very happy that he's given us time this evening to answer some of our questions. Mr. Sharma, good evening, and thank you for joining us. I've been reading through a lot of the arguments that are being made at this point about the farmers' protest. The one that is asked very often, the question that comes up very often is, why are the farmers still holding out on their demands? Why won't they meet the government halfway? Is this unreasonable of them to not maybe give up some of those demands? As someone who's been watching this protest very closely up till now, what is your opinion on it?
I think what is very important to understand is that the farmers' protest, which is unique and unprecedented, as we all know, is primarily not only aimed at the three laws. I think, in my understanding, it is a culmination, or let's say it's a compound anger over the last few decades that is coming out now. They were looking for an opportunity or for a vent to express their feelings, and I think the three laws provided them that kind of a space. Why I'm saying this is because if you have seen the economics that the farmers are faced with for the last 4 decades at least, we have seen how agriculture has deliberately kept impoverished. And this has been happening not only in India, but also globally, whereas the rich countries are providing huge subsidies to supplement the farm income. But in developing countries, we have left them to fend for themselves. I have often talked about an analysis that my team did sometimes back, and it tells you how, farmers were left behind when it came to providing everyone, different section of the society with a particular income package. Now, let me say that, and I think that should help to understand why the compounding, as I said, the compound anger that has built up over the decades. In 1970, these were the formative years of Green Revolution. In 1970, the procurement price of wheat was 76 rupees per quintal. That was a time when we needed farmers to produce wheat and paddy. And we all know that Punjab and Haryana, at that time, it was only Punjab. Farmers did a remarkable job, and the rest, of course, is history. Now, when the procurement price was, as I said, 76 rupees per quintal, in 2015, 45 years later, the procurement price rose to 1,450 rupees per quintal. This was an increase of 19 times. Not percent, but 19 times. Now, when I compare, or let's say if you were to look at the price parity norms or the income parity norms in that connection, income parity norms, let's look into how the government employees fared, for example. Their basic pay and DA in that 45-year period went up by 120 to 150 times. The basic pay and DA of university professors and college professors and lecturers went up by 150 to 170 times. The basic pay and DA of school teachers, because their salaries were too low in 1970, it went up in the ratio of 280 to 320 times. Whereas the income of the farmer, which you can measure from the minimum support price he gets, if we take it as an example, was only 19 times. Now, I'm sure each one of us will understand that if the income of, let's say, government employees or university professors had also increased in the same proportion 19 times, I'm sure many of them would have committed suicide and many of them would have quit their jobs. But the point I'm trying to make is why we need to understand why were the farmers left behind? Because that's the international design, the economic design we have is that we must move people out of rural areas into the urban areas, because that's how economic growth will take place. And in the process, the best way to do that was to make agriculture unprofitable, uneconomical, and economically unviable, as you would say. And that is what has happened. Now, look at that particular stage, and then look at a study which has come out from OECD along with ICRIAR in New Delhi. The OECD study, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, looked at the farm income between 2000 and 2016-17, which is a period of 16 years. And they found out that Indian farmers lost 45 lakh crores in these 16 years. Every year they were losing 2.64 lakh crore. I personally feel this was an underestimate because they had only worked on a few crops, a handful of crops. And if they had looked at the entire spectrum of agriculture, perhaps the loss would have been still, huge. As compared to what has already been spelled out. 45 lakh crore is not a small amount, I'm sure we will all agree. And then in 2016, another survey, economic survey 2016 tells us that the average income of a farming family in 17 states of India, which means half the country, is only rupees 20,000 a year, which means 1,700 rupees a month. And I'm sure we will all agree that I can't even rear a cow in 1,700 rupees a month. People who live in the cities can't even rear a pet dog, or a pet animal in 1,700 rupees. Imagine people surviving on that amount in half the country. The point I'm trying to make is that anger was building up over the decades. And now they've realized that with these laws coming in, enough is enough, and they need to stand up and voice their concern and, of course, demand their due. I think that is what the nation needs to first understand.
Actually, I just want to focus a little bit on the income that you're talking about, because one of the other arguments that I've heard very often, and I must confess to you, a lot of these arguments arrive on WhatsApp. And I want to be able to clear out these doubts. One of the arguments is that these specific farmers who are protesting, the ones in Punjab and Haryana, are the ones who have benefited a great deal from procurement, from Green Revolution, and from the government's MSP. So they're actually the richest farmers in the country, which is true. But my research tells me the average income of a farming family in Punjab is 2,17,000 rupees per year, which is less than 18,000 rupees a month. I mean, in urban India, 18,000 rupees a month as an income for an entire family is not considered rich. But what is your response to the fact that these are rich farmers, and so they're just protesting in order to be able to, let's say, protect their riches?
Well, let's be very clear that at a time when India needed food, it was Punjab, which now is, of course, bifurcated into Punjab and Haryana. But that belt, of course, and that is called the food bowl of India, that provided food for the country. These were the farmers who pulled the country out of the hunger trap. And if you remember, we were at a time living in what is called ship-to-mouth existence. And food will come from the ship directly into the hungry mouths. That was a situation at one particular time. And then, of course, Punjab farmers have done a remarkable job in pulling country out of that hunger trap. Now, having said that, I think it should be very clear that Punjab farmers, the impression that is being given, as you rightly mentioned, I have also been asked this question a number of times, is that Punjab farmers are rich farmers. I'm amazed what is the definition of richness that we talk about. As you rightly mentioned, that the average income of a farming family in Punjab is about 18,000 rupees a month, and it is less than what a chaprasi would get in the government job. And now the point I'm trying to make is that if we were to look into Punjab's situation, it's very interesting. Punjab has a productivity of wheat, which is the wheat and paddy both, I would say, is amongst the highest in the world. With 5.1 tons of, wheat productivity per hectare and 6.6 tons of paddy productivity, Punjab would be in the top, among the top, countries anywhere in the world. Now, having said that, the impression that Punjab farmers are rich, every third farmer in Punjab is below the poverty line. One. Secondly, we need to know that as you rightly mentioned about the average income, what is the average debt that the Punjab farmers carry? Recently a study has come out from Punjab Agriculture University. It says not rural households, but agriculture households or farm households in Punjab carry a cumulative debt of 1 lakh crore. That is the level of indebtedness in Punjab. Every household has an expenditure of about 10 lakhs, whereas the income is only 6 lakh. I'm talking of household. The income is not only from agriculture. So which means 4 lakh is the average debt they are carrying, and this is what the PAU study tells us. The other part is, it's interesting and fascinating to see that on the one hand, we are projecting farmers as very rich. On the other, let's try to see what has transpired over the last few years in Punjab agriculture. There was a house-to-house survey done by 3 public sector universities: Punjab Agriculture University at Ludhiana, Punjabi University at Patiala, and the Guru Nanak Dev University at Amritsar. They did a house-to-house survey and found out that between 2000 and 2015, 16,600 farmers and farm workers committed suicide. This is Punjab, a state which has one among the highest yields in the world.
I just wanted to point out that while the audience is listening to the data that you're calling out, remember that this is the top of the pyramid of farmers in our country. Everybody else falls below this. Bihar being the worst, Bihar that doesn't have APMCs. Please continue.
So, we need to understand that, these farmers who committed suicide, I'm sure we will all agree, were under, huge debt that they carried, and they need to be pulled out of the debt trap, A. B, also, if you look at the newspapers today, pick up any newspaper, daily you'll find 1 farmer, 2 farmers, 3 farmers committing suicide in Punjab. The point I'm trying to make is, in a state which we believe is comprising of rich farmers, look at the sad situation. Punjab has now turned into a hotbed of farmer suicides. And if this is happening, as you rightly said, in the, let's say, agriculture, the frontline agriculture state of India, then imagine what is happening in the rest of the country.
Well, the other argument that comes up is that the farmers in Punjab are overproducing food, and and so there is a glut, and this needs to be regulated, and that's what they're worried about. Because they're overproducing, they're worried that in an open market, they won't get the price anymore. I just want to insert here, this is my opinion for the audience. I don't normally give my opinion, but in a country where 1 out of 3 children, including our own children, is sleeping hungry and is malnourished, it is immoral to say that we are producing too much food. There is a severe issue with that argument at all. But I would like you to address, if we set aside the hunger issue that we still have in our country that we haven't solved, the idea that these farmers are over farming their land, they are draining the water table, they're producing too much wheat and paddy, and so they're worried an open market will cause their price to crash.
No, it is very interesting. On the one hand, we keep on telling our farmers to produce more, raise their productivity. We should bring in more technology to help you raise your productivity. And when the Punjab farmers have demonstrated that they have the capacity to do that, and they have done it also, we blame them for overproduction. I find this, a kind of a paradox that needs to be answered. Why do we then tell farmers to go on increasing their productivity? A. B, this is what we had always been pushing for. We've been always wanting Punjab and Haryana to produce more because they, as you rightly mentioned, there is this deficit that the country faces as far as the food availability is concerned. Not in that particular sense that we don't have stocks, but what I'm trying to say is, if we were to ensure that everyone gets food according to the minimum calorie requirement, perhaps we would not have any surplus left. As you rightly mentioned, we have the largest population of hungry in the world in India. And this is happening at a time when we have a huge surplus of food on the other hand. So this paradox of plenty, I think has to be explained, but that's a different issue. Now, the problem is that we are blaming Punjab farmers for overproducing, A, and we are saying that it has caused environmental damages or it has created environmental crisis. For instance, the mining of the groundwater, and then of course the stubble burning and so on. Well, Punjab farmers are producing paddy. There have been several reports, which have been pushing for a diversification of cropping pattern in Punjab. It started with the Johal committee in the early 80s. Now, despite those reports and despite the effort that the governments have taken, state governments have gone for alternative crops that farmers should grow. The point is that when they grow paddy, they at least know they will be getting an assured price at the time of the harvest. Whereas in the remaining or the other alternatives that we have given to those farmers, there is no such incentive available. So, you can't expect or you don't think that the farmer is foolish enough that he will sacrifice his income for the sake of all the environmental concerns that we have. He also is equally worried. Let me tell you, he's worried that there is a depleting groundwater level. He's also worried about the stubble burning, because after all, his family is the first one to be hit by the pollution that emerges. Now, the point is, the alternatives. Now, let's look at the alternatives. Last year, the government promoted maize as an alternative to paddy, which is okay. And farmers did shift. Some farmers did shift to maize. And then at the end of it, the procurement price of maize was 1,850 rupees per quintal. And what the farmers got was from 600 to about 1,200 rupees per quintal. Now, why do you think that the farmer would take that kind of a cut? Would take that kind of a cut in his income? He also needs to support his family. And already we know agriculture incomes are very, very low, at the lowest of the pyramid. And I think we need to understand that we have failed to give him an alternative. He's willing to move forward and diversify from paddy. But why can't we ensure that, in the case of maize, for instance, why couldn't we ensure that whatever comes in the mandis, whatever the farmers brings to the markets is procured by the government at the minimum support price it had announced? And I'm sure if the government had ensured that, farmers would have gladly shifted to alternate crops. So I think there is some problem with or let's say we are trying to cover up our failure of not providing farmers with the right kind of a choice.
With Shraddha, there's also now an argument saying that on one hand, we're inviting the private sector to invest in agriculture, set up mandis, buy directly from the farmers, which, if you look at free market economics, is a good thing. But on the other hand, we're saying, no. We want the private sector to come in, but we want them to pay a fixed price irrespective of what they're buying, which is the opposite of free market economics, which is why the government cannot possibly fix a legal right to MSP. The other argument, also because you've studied this, I know, a great deal, is if we give MSP to all farmers, then that will drive up the price of food for the end customer, causing inflation, making food unviable for a lot of very poor people in this country. What is your response to that?
Well, you have posed, I would say, 3 or 4 questions in your this particular question, and let me try to see how I can best answer that. Your first question is that if the private sector comes in or the corporates come in, farmers will get choices and they'll get a better price. That's the argument that we see everywhere. But the point here is that where in the world are farmers getting a better price? I want to know that. Just because you and me learned economics with the kind of market economy in economics 101, so we were made to believe that market is the best choice available, and also markets will provide a better price to the primary producer, or happens to be the farmer in this particular case. Now I'll give you 2 examples. Let us look at chocolate. I'm sure all of us love chocolates. Now, chocolate is or let's say the confectionery industry, of which chocolate is one part or a major part, has a turnover of $210 billion. And there are millions of farmers who produce that cocoa bean from which chocolate is made, in Latin America, in Africa, in Central America, and so on. And there's a report which came out in 2020. It is called Cocoa Barometer 2020. It tells us that the average income of a cocoa grower is $1.3 a day, which means 100 rupees a day. And this is in a sector which, as I said, is profitable. The processing sector as well as the retail sector makes a whole lot of profits. $210 billion is the turnover. Now, the point here is this industry is, or this sector is based on, much of its trading that takes place is on commodity trading. And we believe commodity trading is the future. The futures market will dictate prices and so on and so forth. But imagine $1.3 a day. This is less than the price of a chocolate bar. So if that is the kind of gain that the markets have given to these farmers, I think it should be a lesson for us whether these markets are so-called efficient or try to help raise the farm income. Imagine, I would like to ask a question to those who say that markets cannot provide a fixed price. Imagine if these cocoa farmers were getting a minimum support price. Imagine if these farmers were getting a minimum support price for all these years that they have been growing cocoa. And then if you look at the total turnover, $210 billion, couldn't that be shared with the farmers, the kind of profits that the companies have been making? Let's look at coffee industry. We all, again, morning, we wake up to a cup of coffee. 2 years back, I was invited to deliver the presidential address at the Indian Coffee Growers, conference in Bangalore. And they were asking that they have 8,000 crores of debt and they wanted the government to write off. They also were demanding a minimum support price for coffee. And my question to them was, I thought you were the better among the other agriculture communities. I thought the coffee growers were much better. And now you have value chains, your Starbucks, Barista, CCD, and so on. And so why should you be complaining? And so they said, but this is what a real condition. So I said, okay, if I go to the market and I go to Barista or to any other coffee kiosk and I order a cup of coffee for, let's say, 250 rupees, what is your share? They said, we'll work it out and come to you the next morning. They worked it out and then they came to me and, you'll be surprised. If you pay 250 rupees for a cup of coffee, the farmer share is only 1 rupee out of that. Now, globally, if you look at it, the coffee industry, the turnover is about $102 billion. And the majority of the coffee growers in the world are getting less than the minimum that the World Bank and United Nations has, the poverty line, which is $1.9 a day. Now, this is happening in coffee industry, and I'm so happy that some of the American universities or economists have now raised their voice. This is led by Jeffrey Sachs, the famous economist, who is talking about that we need to provide these farmers with a kind of an income package that assures a livelihood for them. Now, the question that I would like to ask is, imagine if these farmers were given minimum support price. Look at what would have happened to that particular industry. Why not? After all, couldn't that particular value chain, which has a turnover of $102 billion, couldn't it afford to pay farmers a better price rather than leaving them at the mercy of, or what mercy? I think they are below the poverty line. And then if you look at America, America has been having these market reforms for the last 7-8 decades at least. And then America also provides every 5 years, comes up with what is called as Farm Bill, providing a kind of a massive subsidy support for investments in agriculture and direct income support to farmers. This happens every 5 years. In the 2018 Farm Bill that America provided for, or America announced, it provided for $867 billion support to agriculture for the next 10 years. And imagine, today, or let's say 2020, the latest data for which we have got, 2020, the farmers in America were saddled with a bankruptcy of $425 billion. If after all these subsidies that I talked about, $425 billion is the amount the farmers are saddled with in America, which is only 1.5% of the American population. The other part is studies have shown that in rural America, the rate of suicide is 45% higher than urban America. There are articles, cover stories in Time, Newsweek, New York Times, and so on, which tells us how pathetic is the condition of farming sector in America. When I say farming sector, I'm talking of farmers. And, corporates have taken over that kind of a space, and farmers have been pushed out of agriculture. This is what, at the time of Richard Nixon, when he was the president, this was in the early 1970s, his agriculture secretary had said, get big or get out. And this is what America followed. Now, that's the same kind of design which we are bringing into it. Now, my question is, if for a larger holding, for a bigger land holding, which is more than 400 acres is the average land holding in America, if the same market design failed to prop up farmers' income, please tell me, how will that same design work in a country like India, where 86% farmers have less than 5 acres of land holding? So I think we as a country need to have a different model of agriculture, which based on our strengths and our requirement, and that should be providing farmers with a stable income or an assured income over the next few decades, because that's what they are fighting for. They have suffered enough.
Are there any examples, Mr. Sharma, of that assured income being given anywhere else in the world, and has it worked?
Well, this is a question which is often asked to me. I said, why are we so mentally, I would say, the word I don't know, be constrained that we always think that there should be a model outside. Why can't we create a model for the world to follow? And I remember, ever since Indian farmers have been protesting, there have been lots of inquiries that, what is happening in India? How does it impact the farmers globally? And now, believe me, farmers are calling me up. At least I can share my personal experience. Farmers are calling me up from across the world, wanting to know, and also, supporting this movement in the sense they are saying what we actually want is an assured income by way of an assured price. And if India can show the way, is something that we would also like to follow. Now, imagine a farmer called me up the other day from America, and he said, asking me what is happening in India. When I explained to him, he said, oh my God, this is what we need also in America, because, he says his family, and when he looks at his parents also, he says, we have been living in debt all through our life. And living in debt is living in hell. And that's what they want off.
So let me ask you this then. Do you believe that and this is one of the questions that one of our audience members has also asked, do you believe that the fear that the farmers have at this point, that these laws brought in at this time will actually render them indebted, will cause them to lose their land, will cause them to lose their income, will cause them to lose perhaps also, their ability to negotiate with big corporates, so they feel that this will take away all of their rights? Is that, in your opinion, a valid fear, or are they overreacting?
Well, I think we need to understand why do the farmers carry that kind of a fear. I think there is a need for a discussion on that. There is a need for a deliberation. We need to really debate on this particular aspect across the country with different kinds of stakeholders and academia and so on and so forth. Why I'm saying this is the farmers, if they are saying that, this is the kind of thing that they fear, I think we need to understand why are they saying it. And if you look at what has happened over the last few decades in India, it is quite clear what they are standing for is nothing that we can think that it will not happen. Gradually, we are heading towards that stage, because I gave you the examples in America, in Europe, in rest of the rich countries. This is the situation that the farmers are today. And Indian farmers, believe me, we can say that, oh, they are uneducated, they are illiterate, so they don't understand. But I think this time, the nation has perhaps never thought that this would happen, that the farmers are very particular. They understand all the consequences or the nitty-gritty of what the laws are and so on. I think that is what has surprised people, whether economists or the policymakers. So I think let's not take it that farmers don't know. Farmers know what is going to hit them, and also know what is in their favor. So I think that's what the point I'm trying to make is, let's try to talk to them. Let's try to discuss and debate.
Are you saying, Mr. Sharma, you said we should discuss, we should understand, we should talk to them, we should deliberate. The government has argued repeatedly, as recently as last night, that there was enough deliberation about these laws before they were brought in Parliament and outside, that the due process was followed, and hence these laws cannot be repealed because the due process was followed. Do you disagree?
Well, I think what the government says, of course, we have read, but we have also seen there are a lot of reports which tells, and even the farmers are saying they were never consulted before the ordinances were issued. They were never consulted even after the ordinances and before the laws were pushed in the parliament. There was not a parliamentary debate that the country would have expected, as far as these laws were concerned. We also know that. And we also know that, the way these laws were pushed, and then secondly, politicians did want that, it should be handed over to the standing committee to look into, examine all these things. Even that was not done. So, the haste with which we push the laws, I think raises a lot of questions. And that is what the farmers are saying. And that's what I'm saying, that whatever the claims apart, it's time that we a broader discussion in this country. And why not in the media also? I don't understand why should the media be only, carrying one viewpoint and then hammering on that this is the only way forward. I think it is time to really, sit across the tables, have a democratic kind of a discussion, and I think that is a kind of a solution that whatever emerges out of it should be the one that the country should be looking forward to.
I agree with you that the media has only shown one point of view, but one of the arguments they've also made, and you said we should sit across the table, is that after 11 rounds of discussion, the farmers have refused to climb down from their stand. They want a unilateral repeal, even when the government offered to put it off by a year and a half, by 18 months. Did you see any merit in that offer?
Well, why the lack of confidence? I think only the farmer leaders can explain. But the fact of the matter here is that, when the 11 rounds of negotiations took place, I think what we have read in the newspapers is that every round ended up with the same kind of a, outcome that let's meet next time. And just because both sides were stubborn or not willing to relent, I think we still continue with this stalemate. I think the time has come. We have seen that this unprecedented movement of farmers, which is unique, as I said earlier, unique even globally, because in my observation, it hasn't happened anywhere in the world that, farmers have been, let's say, on the borders, pitching or camping at the border of the New Delhi for 70 days now, 70 plus days. And prior to that, they have been, of course, protesting on the streets for about 2 to 3 months in Punjab and Haryana. So the point I'm trying to make is this is something which has never happened. And I think we need to learn, we need to understand why is it that the farmer is willing to put everything on stake? Why is it that the farmer is willing to undergo that harsh environment, the cold weather and so on, brave the cold weather and stand for his rights? I think this is something which is not, we not brush it aside. And we need to know that the pain that the farmers carry, the kind of anger that the farmers carry needs to be heard, needs to be understood. And I think the civil society has a role here, including the policymakers. We all need to understand why are the farmers so angry and so adamant.
Mr. Sharma, there's also the question, and this question comes in from Amlan Ray, who says, is it feasible that the government has kept promising to double the farm income? Now, for several years, for 6 years, the government has said that it will double farm income. Is corporate investing into the farm sector the way to double that income? Also, I just want to add to that, we currently have, on last count, we have about 7,000 APMCs, which is government-owned mandis in the country. We need about 40,000 in order to at least reasonably cover most of this country. Is private investment the way to do that? Or do you think state government should do it themselves?
Your first question, we believe that the corporate sector will provide farmers with a higher income, and especially in the context of doubling farmers' income, then I think let's understand that what the farmers are asking actually is that they be assured a minimum price for every harvest, which means for all the 23 crops for which MSP is announced in this country, and we know effectively it works out only for wheat and paddy, but for the rest of the crops, it remains on paper. Now, what the farmers are saying is that we need to raise the benchmark and see that MSP becomes a legal right for farmers, which means no trading takes place below the MSP. Now, I find it very interesting. The corporates, the economists, the policymakers are saying, the farmers are being misled, and the fact of the matter is that the companies are willing or will be providing a higher income to the farmers. Now, higher income to what? That's the question. If the benchmark we have is minimum support price, if the companies are willing to provide a higher price than the minimum support price, then I think what is the objection? In fact, the companies should be standing with the farmers and demanding a minimum price level beyond which they are in any case going to provide a higher price. That's what they say. So why are they objecting to a minimum support price that we should not be providing farmers with a minimum or legal right for minimum support price? I've seen many articles, including by some BJP spokesperson also, which say that if we provide minimum support price to farmers or make it legal, then the rest of the laws would collapse. The 3 laws would collapse, which means actually you are not willing to provide a higher price. That is why laws will collapse. So that is one thing we need to be clear. I find no reason why we cannot pay a minimum support price for all the crops that farmers are fighting for or they are demanding, because these 23 crops that we talked about, for which MSP is announced every year, are the crops which cover up roughly 80% of the gross cropped area. And there are of course vegetables and fruits for which we need to follow what has been done in Kerala, which has also provided a floor price, minimum floor price. Now, having said that, the point I'm trying to make is that this is something which I call it as a strength of India. When we have the mechanism to provide minimum support price, let us build on that. Let us try to say that farmers everywhere in the country should be getting minimum support price. That's the minimum that we should assure. Anyone is paying, private is willing to pay a higher price, well, we all welcome it. But at least they should get a minimum support price or a minimum assured price, as I would say. The second part, your question was, sorry, I forgot.
If we need to go from 7,000 to 40,000 mandis, is private sector the way to do that?
Well, I think, as I said, these are two strengths of India. First, of course, is the minimum support price. We have learned that the farmers in Punjab are a little better off compared to the rest of the country because they get the minimum support price. And I wish the Bihar farmers were also getting minimum support price. What they threw away in 2006, the APMC mandis, and they promised the same argument, the same excitement was there at that time, that private investment will flow in, there will be private mandis, there will be price discovery and so on. We know 14 years, nothing like that has happened. In fact, this year, we have seen 50 lakh tons of paddy coming from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh and being sold in Punjab. Why? Because the price farmers get there is 800 to about 1200 rupees per quintal. In Punjab, you get the minimum support price, which is 1888 rupees per quintal. Traders find it economical to carry the produce all the way from Bihar into Punjab. Look at that. Now, imagine if Bihar had, instead of throwing away APMC Act, had in fact had a big network or created a network of mandis like in Punjab and given farmers MSP. I'm sure the rate at which labor comes out or farm labor comes out of Bihar would have been far less at this particular time. Having said that, the second strength we have got is we have a network of APMC mandis, and Punjab and Haryana have shown that, demonstrated that it has worked. There are problems with the APMC mandis, and there is a need to reform those mandi structures. But that does not mean you throw away the mandis. And I think what we
Mr. Shah, the government has argued that we're not throwing away the mandis. The mandis will coexist with private mandis.
Well, I'll answer that, but let me finish the earlier one. That, as you rightly said, 7,000 mandis in this country. And what we need, if we were to provide a mandi at 5-kilometer radius for the farmers, we would need 42,000 mandis in this country. I'm sure this is not a big investment that the country can't undertake. This is an investment which should have happened for the last so many decades. But nevertheless, nobody is also at the same time saying that you don't invite private sector to invest or set up a mandi. We should have mandis set up by the private sector as well as the public sector, and they should be operating with the same laws. The rules and regulations should be same for both of them. You can't have that in the APMC mandis, you will have a 6% tax, like in Punjab, the traders have to pay 6% tax or mandi fee, whereas in outside the APMC, you don't have to pay any tax. I think that kind of difference should not be there. We should have a uniform pattern for both private and public. Then only we can have a true competition. Having said that, you will also agree that the closer the farmer has to sell his produce, a mandi is available to him, the less is the chance of distress sale. The further he has to go, more chances of distress sale, which of course the Indian farmers have been undergoing all these decades. So the answer or let's say the task or what India needs to do, to raise the farm income, I think two things: expand the network of mandis and then make MSP a legal instrument. And that is something which the country can then not only provide, I think, a kind of a higher income to our farmers, but believe me, it will become a global model to pull agriculture out of crisis.
Mr. Sharma, do you believe that since November, since these protests in Delhi began, and before that there were protests in Punjab, in Haryana, do you believe that this issue has been mishandled and it could have been at least handled better?
I agree that it could have been handled much better, and I think by this time we could have found out an amicable solution. And it is not difficult. I'm sure you will agree. If you really want to achieve that goal, it is possible. And I think if both sides had worked on this particular objective, that we have to arrive at a positive conclusion, or at a private, not private, but or create a policy initiative which would be helping the farmers to get out of that kind of a crisis that they have been living in, or get out of the agrarian crisis that India is, of course, been passing through for all these years. I think that should have been the challenge. So, and I'm also sure that if the government was to really stand up with the farmers to understand what the difficulties are, and then to bring in laws which at least assure farmers an assured income in the days to come, I'm sure the political gain to the ruling party would have been phenomenal. We can't even imagine. Imagine if 50% of the country stands up with a political party or with the ruling party at this moment. Imagine the kind of strength that they would have gained. So I think it is an opportunity before us to understand the farmers, to take a relook at the laws that they have brought in. And I think it should not be a prestige issue that we cannot take a step back. I think we should be ready. We should be willing. The bigger the power structure, the bigger the heart it should carry.
Also, there have been arguments that agriculture is fundamentally a state subject, and people who are arguing that only Punjab farmers are protesting because it only really affects them. For the greater good, really the rest of the farmers are happy. Does that prove the fact that we actually cannot make central laws or central legislation about agriculture in this country because it's different state to state?
Well, I think, first of all, let's be very clear that there is no denying that agriculture is a state subject and they need to enact their laws. So this issue of federalism is something that is being talked about, and I think it's true, and it is something that we should need to take a relook or take a fresh look at this. But anyway, more important is the other question that only Punjab farmers or only farmers in the northwest part of the country are opposed to these laws. Rest of the country is fine with these laws. Now, let me make it very clear that Sharad Pawar, when he was the agriculture minister, he made a statement in parliament and he said 71% of India's farmers do not know what is MSP. They don't understand the concept of MSP. Why? Because if you remember something which I have been saying often, that Shanta Kumar committee had concluded that only 6% farmers in India get MSP. 94% farmers were dependent on markets. And I'm sure you will agree, if the markets were so benevolent, so kind and so good, I'm sure the agrarian crisis wouldn't have been so severe in India. So it is very clear that markets have failed to deliver. And that is why farmers are demanding MSP. Wherever you go, farmers demand MSP, and farmers demand MSP according to the Swaminathan Commission recommendations also. So I think it is very clear farmers see that MSP can provide them an assured income, even if the MSP doesn't cover the entire, the way Swaminathan had desired. But I think still it gives an assured price to farmers, which of course is missing as far as the markets are concerned. So the choice before us is to bring that MSP model and expand it in the country. That's the real freedom the farmers are looking for. Why should a farmer in Assam, in Odisha, or in Chhattisgarh and so on not get the benefit of MSP like the Punjab farmers? I think that is why the farmers today, I guess so, are actually demanding MSP to be made a legal right across spectrum. That's what they are demanding now, because they understand that one part of the world or one part of the country cannot be the only beneficiary. The remaining part, which has, of course, not known that what they have been losing all these years, is that the benefit should also pass on to them.
You made an interesting argument. You said mandis need to be within a 5-kilometer radius of a farmer in order to make sure there's no distress sale. And for our audience, this basically means that if someone has grown tomatoes and he has a harvest, even taking his harvest to the nearest mandi is a cost, because he needs either a bullock cart or a truck. He has to load it, he has to unload it. Once it gets there, if he doesn't get the right price, he can't bring it back because he has to pay for it again to be brought back. So the closer the mandi, the better it is. So then these laws also allow farmers to sell in neighboring states, to sell across the country. Is that really unnecessary? Because like you said, the farmer needs to be as close to the mandi as possible. It's unlikely they'll cross state lines in order to look for a better price.
That's what I don't understand. You have farmers having a land holding size of 5 acres. 86% farmers have a land holding of 5 acres. They can't even go and sell in another district. They need the mandi to be closer to, as I said, closer to their home. And that's the kind of a system we need to evolve, we need to develop. Instead, we are saying, oh, we have freed the market. Now you or freed the country. Now you can go and sell anywhere. How do you expect a small farmer from Punjab to go and sell in Bangalore or to go and sell in Calcutta? Imagine the cost he has to undergo for transportation, the carryover cost that, and so on. And this is certainly not the way forward. I think what we need, considering our small land holdings, is, as I said earlier, bring the mandis closer to the villages or to their farms. And I remember, let me tell you, when M.S. Randhawa, and I hope you remember his name, M.S. Randhawa was a very distinguished administrator. And I remember in one of my discussions with him, I asked him, I said, who is the best chief minister in Punjab? Because you have known chief ministers in Punjab, everyone, he knew, of course, everyone. And he named somebody. I wouldn't like to get into the political this thing, but I asked him, I said, why did you name that particular person as the best chief minister in Punjab? He said, after his swearing in, he came to me and he said, Dr. Randhawa, please tell me, I'm going to be chief minister for next 6 months and I'm never going to be chief minister again. I know that. So please tell me, what can I do that my name is enshrined in history in golden letters? So what Randhawa advised to him was, look, we have the farmers producing a remarkable harvest. We know that in Punjab. And but the only thing they are missing out is within the village and the mandi, there is no link road. So if you were to set up a network of link roads, that will be something which the Punjab would always look forward to. And according to Randhawa, it was the first provision, or the chief minister who made the provision for setting up link roads, village link roads, was actually that particular politician. Why I'm saying this is important is over the years, Punjab has developed a network, and it's a time-tested thing to go and see how the villages are closely linked by way of village link roads and also by way of market yards, mandis, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of a structure that we need to build in rest of the states and rest of the country. And I think if once we have that, that is what the farmers are actually missing. They don't understand. People who live in Punjab know what it means, but people who live in most parts of the country do not even know, that they need to have a mandi closer to their home and what is the importance of it.
Mr. Sharma, is it fair here, and this is just, and I'm not an economist, I'm just a journalist, is it fair to say that while on one hand people are arguing that the farmers in Punjab who have benefited the most from the APMC and the MSP system are protesting because they have the most to lose, instead of asking the farmers in Punjab to sacrifice themselves, what we should be doing is replicating that model in the rest of the country, so that all farmers are just as rich or just as well-to-do or benefit just as much from the system?
Exactly. I think what you said is this right thing to do. If Punjab farmers are doing relatively better compared to the farmers in the rest of the country, I think the model that Punjab has created is something to be replicated across the country. And that is what the farmers are demanding. And that's what I said, two strengths of ours, one is the minimum support price and the other is the APMC regulated markets, is something that we need to expand across the country. Let every farmer come up to that level as the Punjab farmers. I would like, in the days to come or in the years to come, that Bihar farmers, we know why I'm saying Bihar farmers, because APMC was thrown out in 2006. Bihar farmers also come up to the level of Punjab farmers. Rather than, we bring in a kind of a law which actually leads to APMC mandis becoming redundant over the period, which means the MSP also going away. I don't want Punjab farmers to become like Bihar farmers. I think farmers in the rest of the country should actually come up to the level of Punjab farmers, at least come up to that level.
And of course, the thing that we must acknowledge is that over 60% of our population right now is dependent on agriculture, which you have proven through the data that you called out in the beginning of this conversation is a loss-making business. So farmers right now are investing more in each crop, and when they are done selling that crop, they are actually at a loss. And this has gone on for long enough. So if we are not able to solve for this problem, we will actually have more and more farmers who will be out of work, dragging down the GDP of this country, dragging down our ability to move forward as a nation, dragging down the ability of urban India to actually see any progress, because you will effectively be paying for the entire country out of the proceeds of urban India, and dragging down our any hope of becoming a superpower and competing with countries like China and the US. So it is wrong for us to assume that we should be, that this is something that can be done just like that. The manner in which this has been done right now is enough argument that maybe our government needs to stop, take stock, and come back to the drawing board.
Well, I think the question that you have raised is a much bigger and required to be discussed and talked about. Why I'm saying this is, we have a kind of economic design, as I said earlier, which is based on pushing people out of agriculture into the urban areas. I remember a former governor of the Reserve Bank of India used to say that the biggest reform in India would be when we are able to push people out of farming into the urban centers, because urban centers need cheap labor. I had a question at that time. If the Hadi Mazdoor is what you propose as the way forward, I think we need to take a relook at the entire economic design that we are living with. A. B. The bigger question, if you remember the lockdown period, 2 days of lockdown, and we saw 80 million people go back interstate and intrastate. This reverse migration that the country witnessed. It clearly established that the economic design of pushing people out of rural areas into the urban areas is not the way forward. I think we need to reverse the economic thinking. The world is now questioning that economic thinking. We are talking globally of growth without economic growth. There are various initiatives taken world over where we are moving from that capitalist model. The point I'm trying to make here is that for a country like India, it is not fair to borrow blindly from what is happening outside or what has happened outside. I think it is time that we know our strengths, we know our capabilities, and build up on those capabilities or strengths. Why I'm saying this is, you will agree that if agriculture, considering that 70% of the households are engaged, rural households are engaged in agriculture. If agriculture was profitable and economically viable, I'm sure you will agree it is possible to make agriculture a powerhouse of economic growth. It can again be an engine of economic growth. You don't have to put only industry as the powerhouse of economic growth. There can be two economic, powerhouse of economic growth or engines of economic growth in India. Why do we have to blindly follow what America has done or what European has done? They have pushed people out of agriculture. That's not the model India needs. We have, as you rightly mentioned, 600 million people are in the rural, especially in the agriculture, areas, and if they are directly indirectly involved, 600 million people, you don't have to follow the model that America created. There is only 1.5% left in agriculture. I think what we need to make is or strive for is to make agriculture profitable and economically viable, and this is exactly, I'm sure, would be able to achieve what the Prime Minister's vision is: sabka saath, sabka vikas. I'm sure you will agree, more money in the hands of farmers would bring in so much of demand that, or create so much of demand that you will see it will not be only a booster dose for the economy, it will be a rocket dose for the economy. So when 50% people have more money in their hands, imagine the kind of a demand. I think economists need to get out of the economics 101 course that they have studied. Economics need to get out of that economics thinking that they have lived with all these years, need to go out into the countryside, meet farmers, stay with them, then understand the realities and come up with an economic design that this country needs very, I would say, seriously or with, desperately. I think let's aim at that. Let's make
also the other thing that and I want to just share from personal experience is I've traveled through Andhra Pradesh, which was considered the rice bowl of south of India, where farmers were doing really well, growing 3 crops of rice. Their children had all studied to be engineers. They were working for Satyam and Google and living overseas. So when farmers do well, the next generation, they put them through school, they put them to college, then they power the other industries that you want them to power. But if our farming families are continue to be sentenced to generations of inequality and poverty, we never give them an opportunity to push forward and move to the next level. We've seen this happen as well from the families that are actually protesting from Punjab, and there are families protesting, but the children have gone to college, they have studied, they're working in salaried jobs, but it's still a farming family. We need to find ways to give farming families options of other professions for their children. We need to make farming a viable option so that those children still choose farming because it's viable. I mean, do we really want a country where nobody farms? What will we eat? The second largest population in the world. What are we going to feed these hungry children who we haven't managed to feed, by the way, in the last 1 year? Mr. Devendra Sharma, I really appreciate your time, and I know my audience appreciates it as well. I do hope that we can continue to have such conversations, because obviously this is not the end of this farmer protest. It's going to continue to develop, and we'll have more and more questions to answer. I do hope that we can have more conversations. Yes.
One last word, if you allow me. And let's learn from a Punjabi saying. There's a Punjabi saying, I'll first say in Punjabi. It says, ਪਿੰਡਾਂ 'ਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫਾਰਮਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ I'm talking about the farmers ਉਹ ਬੱਚੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ if the farmers have more money in their hands, that's what they say, their children also become healthy, wealthy and wise, and that can come only from agriculture becoming profitable and economically viable. So I think that's the way forward. Let's learn from Punjabi saying. It's an old saying, and I think that's what we need to focus on and try to rebuild agriculture.
All right. On that note, Mr. Sharma, thank you so much for speaking with us. To our audience, continue to send me your questions, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can on this platform. Thank you for watching.